Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. Let me grab my little clicker here. Okay. Between a crazy week and some computer issues this morning, I'm not quite off script just yet, so my apologies. Before I share why I think our company needs to become much more human-centered, I'd like to pause for a moment and just have everyone think back to all of the crazy changes we've seen here over the last few years. Remember when most of us thought that the 9-to-5 full-time in the office job was an unshakable institution? Seems almost quaint now. Let's go back in time for a moment, all the way to the distant past of 2022, where we saw a staggering exodus of over 50 million people who quit their job that year. That was the highest number of quits since the government had started tracking that data, and it illustrates the perfect storm of a labor shortage combined with ample job opportunities. Turning our attention back to the present, of course, 2023, the job environment feels a lot different. The high interest layoffs, talk of salary freezes, et cetera. What I think is important for all of us to take away from last year's Great Resignation is the knowledge that the needs and wants of our workforce are not static. They're going to change, they're going to evolve, and oftentimes that's going to happen very quickly. Companies who are not prepared to evolve with those changes and fail to adapt are risk getting left behind. Despite all the change we've been through recently, I'm confident it's a small fraction of what we're going to see in the years ahead. I can't think of an area any more important for companies to be thinking about right now than how we manage to put more human connection and sustain that connection within our organizations. As with many transformations, technology is going to play a really large role in this one as well, both as a problem being caused, but also as a potential solution for the issues that we see. Lots of companies today are experimenting with new technologies that have the potential to massively disrupt our workplaces. Despite the irony, however, I have a lot of confidence that those same tools are going to help us get to the core of what we need, and that is the human aspect of our most critical work. I want to share with you now the experience of my partner. She works at an organization here in town, and I'm going to use that as an example of some of the challenges that are happening and how some organizations are failing to adapt to those. I'm going to refer to her employer as Acme for the sake of this discussion, and we'll start by sharing my outsider perspective that it's an organization that has been particularly stodgy through its entire history. They have strictly operated within the confines of the 9-to-5, in the office all the time environment, where they offer their employees below market wages and treat all of them as fungible work units. When COVID hit, Acme miraculously adapted very quickly to the world of remote work, and their leadership was out in publicly patting themselves on the back, saying how they were making lives easier for their employees, helping the environment, et cetera. Unfortunately, now that we're a couple years removed from lockdown, their leadership is going back to their old ways. I hear the stories that she shares with me, and I can't help but understand how this is going to be a really disastrous outcome for them. Now, their leadership is not willing to acknowledge that the world isn't changing, it has permanently changed here, and they're losing employees as a result. My partner shared with me the example of a recent coworker who has been there for ages, has very niche and very impossible to replace skills, and who needed to leave Austin for a period of time to go care for an older parent. That person, mind you, had already been working in a full-time remote position for the last 3 years, and despite all of the time and effort that he put into identifying solutions to make sure that the organization wouldn't be impacted by his going remote, their senior leadership refused to budge on the requirement that he be in Austin. Now, as a result, he walked out the door, and decades of really critical knowledge has walked out with him. Now, I mentioned up front how Acme doesn't pay market wages. And in these increasingly inflation-riddled times, it's hard to imagine why somebody would be fighting to stay there, but the answer is actually fairly straightforward. A near supermajority of US employees have stated their willingness to accept significantly lower wages in exchange for a less stress-filled work environment. Before the pandemic, Acme would never have been considered one of the best places to work. But they understood this trade-off, and they had applied it for decades to help them retain staff that otherwise would have been able to make a lot more money if they went out and looked elsewhere. The gentleman who left Acme recently, he needed to do so to care for an aging parent, but we need to understand that reducing stress for our employees is going to look different for everybody. In some cases, they need to work full-time remote so they can drive their children to and from school every day. In other cases, maybe they want to come in late every Tuesday so they can have piano lessons in the morning. Whatever it is, the companies who are going to be most successful at retaining the scarce but critical talent that they need for their organizations to succeed are going to be those that meet their employees where their needs are, wherever it's possible to do so. Now, she's been there for a number of years at this point. She loves her job, but she's had to spend the last few months here desperately trying to fill a number of critical roles and having very limited success due to the outmoded employment practices of Acme. She's stretched thin, her team is going crazy, and now morale is tanking as a result. She loves her job. She never thought she would be leaving until she retired, but just now she's starting to think that she needs a change, and what's driving that is a recent request she made that was turned down. We both work remotely full-time, and last year we escaped the blast furnace that is an Austin summer by working remotely up in the mountains of Colorado for a couple of weeks. We plan to do the same thing this year. Did I mention the Austin summer? And unfortunately, last week, she was told by her boss that she's only going to be allowed a single out-of-state work week this year. No rationale given whatsoever. Acme is one cautionary tale here, but of course there are many companies all around who are failing to evolve, and they're just continuing to be in denial about how their employees are feeling about their work lives today. Here are some data points reported by Gallup that represent the vital signs of the people who work for our organizations. Let these numbers sink in. You've got 80% of employees who aren't fully engaged and 2/3 of them who aren't feeling good about their well-being. Why, with these types of numbers, should any of us expect that these employees are going to be able to perform to their best abilities? I think Scientific American has done a great job of crystallizing a call to action for everyone in corporate America, but particularly for all of us who are charged with recruiting and retaining the best possible workforce for our organizations. I see the best path for the evolution they're calling for as being even more critical today, given the impending generational shift that we're dealing with. It's definitely a problem for companies when ancient people like myself and my partner, who are on the verge of being out of the workforce, are getting frustrated by their retrograde attitudes. But I would suggest this becomes a critical issue for them to deal with when those same attitudes are starting to turn away the next generation of workers here. Deloitte has conducted a number of studies about Gen Z, and one of their recent findings that really stands out for me is how this generation really desires an employer who is going to care about their well-being. These folks are lifelong digital natives. They've lived in a world that is entirely connected thanks to the internet, and they expect to work in an open and an inclusive environment that, most importantly, is going to align with their values. For Gen Z, these things aren't nice to have. These are must-have, critical components of their decision-making when they're looking at new opportunities. Some of these findings have been recently echoed by a LinkedIn study that revealed that 87% of Gen Z professionals are prepared to are prepared to quit and go work elsewhere if they see another organization that resonates with their values better than their current one. If you're not already aware, the hard work of pleasing Gen Z isn't over once you've got them into your organization. They're only going to stick around if they feel like they are working in an environment where they can be seen and appreciated as their whole selves. Another Deloitte study recently revealed how Gen Z ranks humaneness and empathy as one of the top two requirements that they want to see in a boss. How does the current crop of Gen X and millennial managers feel about this statement? They ranked empathy in a distant 5th place. Obviously, we've got a mismatch of expectations there. These changes in attitude within the workplace make it imperative that our organizations approach work and leadership differently. The companies that were successful back when many of us in this room first started our careers, the way that they were able to succeed needs to be entirely different now. We need to prioritize employee well-being. We need to foster a culture of connection. And most importantly, we need to demonstrate our commitment to our employees to do everything possible to help them succeed, not only in the office, but when they're outside of it. It's a tall order, but I think it is an outcome that is eminently achievable through an intentional blend of both humanity and technology. Our current era is marked by radical shifts in technology and advancements that are happening every day. This is especially true in the workplace. For example, thanks to the near universal adoption of high-quality video conferencing during COVID, we're now all having face-to-face conversations every day with coworkers who previously were nothing more than disembodied voices on a weekly conference call. My company could not exist in its current hyper-distributed form without technologies like these because they afford my employees the flexibility and the reduced stress that they want in their lives while still allowing all of us to function as a community of tightly interconnected people. Our values and culture, the essence of who we are and what we can accomplish is all tied up in the web of relationships among those folks that you see on the screen. I'm also including the kids who are in some of these frames, as well as others who aren't, given the number of meetings I've attended where one or more of them have delightfully joined us as well. Now, it's no doubt cliche for me as a software vendor to stand up here and advocate for how leveraging technology is the best path to maximize the humanity of our organizations. But I would be guilty of keynote malpractice if I didn't use a few moments of my time to discuss one more thing I've become confident will soon have huge repercussions for all of us in the world of HR. This bold prediction was made by HR executive in 2021. Now, the article wasn't nearly as dramatic as the headline suggests, but I attribute that to the writers not appreciating how significantly the tools would evolve in such a short amount of time. The headline can be interpreted in a couple of different ways, and one of them reminds the cynic in me of a joke that I first heard from one of my most influential bosses years ago. Now, the job description of the person is to feed the dog. The job description of the dog is to make sure that the person never touches any of the machines that are running the factory. As I've given a lot more thought to an expansive vision of AI here, what I'm realizing is that this is what so many people are being sold. If you swap out the word factory for office, and machines for AI, this is absolutely a pitch that is being heard by VCs in Silicon Valley right now across a whole range of different domains. I have a different vision, at least for my company, as to what the value of AI is going to be for us in the short term. Ethan Mollick is a professor at the Wharton School of Business. He studies innovation and has recently taken up the intersection of artificial intelligence and work. If you're on Twitter, I definitely suggest following him because every day he's posting really interesting experiments that he's trying and showing the results of those. He's promoting a helpful framework where he suggests looking at these AI tools as being the next batch of interns for our companies. They're smart, they can take up lots of annoying work, but at the same time, they have to be trained. We have to figure out how are we best going to divvy up the work between us and them. I will stress this isn't some form of sci-fi vision of the future. There is real meaningful work being done by AI in corporations right now in conjunction with people. Some recent studies have shown that folks were able to achieve measurably higher productivity on certain programming and language-related tasks by using the tools, some of the tools that we're talking about here today. Not only did they see these huge bumps in productivity, they also reported significantly higher job satisfaction because they had managed to offload their most mind-numbing tasks here. It's through this lens where I see the possibility for AI to live up to that headline from HR executive and start to truly make traditional HR extinct. Now, before I go further, I would just ask for a show of hands here. Can everyone raise their hand who has heard of ChatGPT? Okay, about half, I think. How many of you have actually tried to accomplish meaningful work at your job using ChatGPT? A lot smaller. For those who aren't already familiar, ChatGPT is a form of artificial intelligence called a large language model. These tools excel at tasks that are focused on language, just like the work that currently consumes the vast majority of time for so-called knowledge workers like ourselves. Last week, I decided to give ChatGPT a representative task from the world of HR and asked it to compare a candidate's resume to a job description and then tell me whether or not that candidate was a good fit. A lot of text here, you can't see it, I'm sure. You'll get the slides, I understand, after the session today. But what's important here is what I've highlighted here in the blue box. The system has come back and noted how this particular candidate has an extensive background. Now, this isn't a phrase that was lifted from the resume itself, but rather is an accurate summation that the AI made based on the document that it reviewed. ChatGPT highlighted telemedicine, despite the fact that it wasn't mentioned in the job description, because telemedicine, of course, is a huge factor that's influencing the world of healthcare all around us now. Finally, even though the resume made no mention of the candidate's willingness to travel, the AI made the correct inference based on its understanding of the role that that candidate was already in, that was going to be a good fit for the candidate. So after trying ChatGPT through the perspective of a corporate recruiter, I wanted to try a different experiment, but this time using the persona of an agency recruiter instead. For this experiment, I gave the same resume and the same job description to the system, but instead I asked it to tell me, what can I do to this resume to make it a more compelling match for the particular job description? A quick skim for those who are up front here might suggest that the response from the system is boilerplate resume tips. But I'll once again direct you to what I've highlighted here in the blue box. Item 2 makes a very specific comparison between the job description and the candidate's resume and makes a very simple suggestion for an improvement. This is concrete guidance that even my 18-year-old would manage to follow. Item number 4 highlights a potential gap in the resume that should be addressed. But note how the AI helpfully suggests that any changes should be honest and genuine without exaggeration or misrepresentation. Good guidance, typically. If I was working at an agency and saw results like this from a brand new intern fresh off the streets with zero training, I would be absolutely thrilled. What has me as a technologist, however, far more excited is seeing for myself just how much progress has been made by these tools in just a few short months. I was able to do this by taking the same task that I just described and feeding it instead into version 3.5 of ChatGPT, which came out just a few months ago. Rather than the specific tailored feedback that version 4.0 was able to generate for me, here with ChatGPT 3.5, I indeed received that generic resume improvement advice. There's really nothing here that I wouldn't find within seconds of just Googling good resumes on the web. Now, I have it on good authority that ChatGPT 5.0 is already done and being prepared for launch. I can't begin to imagine what is going to be feasible for these tools in the years ahead. I write science fiction in my spare time. I write a lot about AIs, but I still cannot wrap my head around the fact that these things are now real. They're not ready for prime time. I'm not advocating that you're going to hand an AI to your recruiters and ask them to just let the system do its work, but their ability to help us is absolutely going to make a big impact in our work. I'd like to conclude by returning to my original thesis about how we need to center the humanity within our organizations and ask you to envision one of your internal recruiters and think about how their work might change in this new AI-augmented world. What will her day be like after she's trained an army of interns to handle the rote, boring tasks that nonetheless needs to happen for the organization to be able to function? My hope is she'll be able to focus her time on the part of the job that I imagine is what she actually really loves. And that's being an ambassador for your company and creating and nurturing those relationships with candidates. No AI is ever going to be able to replace those genuine human connections. Those are what make people feel seen, valued, and ultimately, in our interests, begging to be hired. Now, how impactful might an outcome like that be for your organization? It might be hard for you to quantify an answer to that purely in the abstract. So let me provide some concrete data here from a related area to better illustrate. The BountyJobs platform helps talent acquisition teams partner with a worldwide network of recruiting agencies who can source talent for their hardest to fill jobs. Unfortunately, some of your peers in TA believe that they can just throw a job description over the wall and recruiting agencies will make it rain perfect candidates. Guess what? Recruiting agencies are actually filled with people, and those people will perform at their best when they feel they are working on behalf of someone who has taken the time to make an authentic connection and successfully evangelize your company's culture and its values. We've measured the ROI of this simple task, and what we see is that companies that prioritize doing these recruiter introduction sessions receive twice as many submissions, and all of those candidates are far more likely to actually be worth an interview. So the path forward for HR leaders who want to build and maintain the best possible modern workforce could not be any more clear in my eyes. If we blend the ever-increasing supply of transformative technologies with the irreplaceable power of human connection, we're going to give ourselves the best chance possible of building that organization and giving our employees the satisfaction and fulfillment they not only demand, but also deserve in exchange for investing their time and energy on our behalf. Thank you very much. If you'd like to connect about this topic or anything else, please come on out to the table.